one of the conferees, a House member, is having his picture taken. He's not in the room, is he? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start by working a bill or two, and then we will get into the bill hearing. The bill hearing, I don't think, will take very long at all. I don't know that working any of the bills that we have up for today will take that long, but hey, this is the Senate Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, so we can spend a lot of time on things. I will direct your attention to House Bill 2255. Just as a brief reminder of what the legislation contains, we will start with a little information from our reviser of statutes while you pull the file out of your folder and prepare for working House Bill 2255. Reviser Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2255 addresses weights and measures laws in Kansas. First, the bill undertakes a reorganization and cleanup of the weights and measures chapter of law. Secondly, the bill would change the fees for weights and measures. And finally, it would include and establish the requirements for electric vehicle supply equipment that is commercially used. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Committee, any questions of our reviser? Seeing none, thank you for that brief overview. Committee, we will work the bill at this time. Are there amendments to House Bill 2255? Senator Titus. Then we'll get.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Reviser Lawrence, if you could pass out the amendment. So when we had the hearing on this, I asked a question about purchasing through online apps, and my concern is, you know, we have this program, they do price checking and scanning, and it's sort of integrated with the Consumer Protection app. And one of the things that I've had constituents raise to me that can be an issue is oftentimes if you get on your app for the grocery store, the pricing will sometimes be different, or they'll have a cheaper alternative like a generic or store brand product that you can only buy it in store. It doesn't even show up as an available product on the app, even though it's in stock. And one of the major, I mean, there's some consumer decisions there, but there's also an issue that if you're using online ordering because you can't get out as far as disabilities, things like that, to not make those products available just means you have to pay more for your groceries. It doesn't get into the subscription stuff like that, but what I'd like to do is make sure this program, since they're in these areas and doing regulation anyway, if people have complaints that these products aren't accessible by the regular means, I'd like them to have a place to go with that complaint so that it can be looked at. I think it'd also be good to have them checking the price ability of the apps. That fits in with their mission anyway. And so the amendment just sort of expands that ability. I'm not looking at a major expansion of the agency or the program. I would envision this to be solely a complaint-based process, but I just wanted to see if we could make the authority clear in that area. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Go ahead and make your motion if you would. We'll see if we get a second, and then we'll go to questions.
I will move adoption of my amendment.
Is there a second? Senator Ware seconds the motion. Now, discussion on the motion to amend. Questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if the proposer of the amendment had an opportunity to discuss this with the Department of Ag.
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did. They were okay with the language. They did think it was appropriate as complaint-based to this point in time, though they didn't want to spend staff up or anything like that. So.
And can you tell me what makes it complaint only?
Senator Titus.
So the way this statute is structured, it's not set up that way, but they've often run many of the, if you go into the whole statute where we add in this on page 14, there's about 25 different things they do. Many of those have always been complaint only. So I looked at trying to make it clear, but I didn't want to rewrite the whole statute today either.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Additional questions, comments on the amendment? Seeing none, Senator Titus, you may close on your amendment.
I close.
You've heard the motion to amend House Bill 2255. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We are back on the bill as amended. Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had an amendment that would eliminate the additions for electrical charging applications, and I'll ask the revisor to pass that out.
Senator Francisco, would you explain your amendment, please?
Thank you. This amendment would delete the references to electric vehicle supply equipment used commercially to be tested and inspected annually. I have asked the department if they could give me some information about how this would work beyond just any owner of the equipment having to make a private contract with an inspection service. So it's not an inspection service that at this point the Department of Agriculture is contemplating providing. And as far as I know, and I have just recently checked my email, I have not gotten any information about what they think the costs might be to consumers for this. So at this point, it would, because it's been passed by the House, it would go to conference committee. The department would still have a little more time to determine what the cost might be or how that might work. They did indicate to me that if the charging service was provided for free, that requirement would not apply. I'm still a little nervous about the word commercial if that free service is at a lodging establishment or a grocery store.
Sorry,
Be happy to.
Do we wish to move your amendment, then we'll have discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the amendment.
Is there a motion to amend? Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Ware. Discussion on the motion to amend. Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Francisco, would you be amenable to the idea of perhaps leaving in the references to the electric vehicle supply equipment so it could fall under the jurisdiction of the department, but striking the requirements in the new sections at the end of the bill? Would that be an agreeable compromise?
Senator Francisco.
I would, because this may be important for them to establish a way to check this. When I talk to them, I know that not a lot of people have had experience with electric vehicle charging. When I charge my car, I always get a reading through the application about how much electricity is being provided. So I just think, I'm happy to leave this, but if you, would that start on page 1? or not, page 1 talks about requiring electric vehicle supply equipment to be tested and inspected annually.
Senator Titus?
I believe, if I'm reading this correctly, and the revisor could double check, if we just removed new section 23 and new section 24 and left the rest, I don't believe there's any annual requirement. It would just mean the equipment could be tested by the department. But there's no annual requirement. Is that correct? She's saying yes, so.
Senator Francisco?
Then my question for the revisor, so what would the requirement on page 1, lines 26 and 27 be referring to?
Vice Chair Lawrence?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is the title of the bill, which is describing things that are happening in the bill. So if you remove 23 and 24, you wouldn't need that in the title.
Francisco?
That's what happens when you have a title that's longer than. But thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Senator Titus?
So I would offer a substitute motion to leave in everything in the bill and continue with striking new section 23 and new section 24.
There is a substitute motion to only strike new section 23 and new section 24, which are found on page 25 and 26. Is there a second? Second by Senator Francisco. Discussion on the substitute motion to amend. Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The maker of the motion, the substitute, would you explain again what you're doing? Thank you.
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the idea would be that as we're doing a comprehensive update of the weights and measures statutes, this is a new technology that at some point I think we probably will flesh out more of that consumer relationship, but I'd like to have the department to have the ability to start looking at this area, and if people have specific complaints in a commercial interaction, to give them, again, similar to the previous amendments, a little bit of recourse. But I think if we're doing this comprehensive update, let's make sure we're forward-looking, and as this develops and they maybe need to look at annual inspections, then it gives the department the opportunity to come back, bring us evidence, and justify something more regular if it's ever needed.
Senator Reichman. Additional questions, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does this belong under Department of Agriculture?
Who are you asking the question? I know you're not asking the chair.
No, I was asking the carrier of the amendment. Okay. I want an answer.
Senator Titus.
So, the Department of Weights and Measures as a division has, in most states and historically in Kansas, has always been under this department. Over the years, we've sort of expanded what weights and measures includes. This makes sense if you think of it as a fuel source for vehicles and measuring it, right? The Weights and Measures is the unit that inspects the gas station pumps, because you see the Kansas Department of Agriculture sticker on that. And so I think this makes sense here. There's maybe not another agency, I guess the better way to say it is, they have the sort of inspectors and the regulatory framework that have dealt with this sort of thing. So if we were to place something like this in another agency, I suspect they'd be doing a lot of work to reinvent the wheel.
Appreciate that. What I was thinking more of was, why isn't it under the utility that provides the power to the charging station? I mean,
If you've got questions, we can seek answers.
that was a question.
Okay. Senator Titus, you wish to elaborate?
Well, I think it's just they probably don't want to take on inspecting all of these various charging units. They typically get you to the meter, and I suspect they wouldn't want to take it on, would be my guess, but.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that Evergy works with ChargePoint, and so you probably wouldn't want a division to be checking itself. So that would be another reason to leave it in the Department of Agriculture.
Thank you.
Additional questions, comments on the substitute motion to amend? Seeing none, Senator Titus, you may close on your substitute motion.
I close.
You've heard the motion to amend House Bill 2255. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion appears to pass. Motion does pass. We are on the bill, back on the bill as amended. Are there additional amendments? And if there are no additional amendments, I'm willing to entertain a motion on the bill. Is there a motion? Senator Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out House Bill 2255 favorably as amended.
You have heard the, oh, is there a second? Seconded by Senator Titus. You've heard the motion to pass out favorably as amended. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion appears to pass. Motion does pass. The bill is passed out as amended favorably. Okay, committee, now we will go to the bill hearing on House Bill 2028, requiring the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks to offer discounted resident senior combination hunting and fishing passes, etc. We will start with an overview of the legislation from our reviser. Again, House Bill 2028.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, committee. House Bill 2028 relates to combination hunting and fishing passes and licenses for certain populations. So first, Section 1 would revive and amend KSA 329100, which was enacted in January of 2013 and expired on June 30th of 2020. The statute requires the Department of Wildlife and Parks to offer a resident senior combination hunting and fishing pass to residents who are 65 years of age or more. The cost of the pass could not exceed 1/8 of the fee for a general combination lifetime hunting and fishing license. Second, Section 2, current law requires the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks to issue and make available a kids lifetime combination hunting and fishing license to residents who are 7 years of age or younger. This statute is currently set to expire on July 1, 2032. House Bill 2028 would remove the expiration of the statute. This bill would take effect upon publication in the Kansas Register and pass the House on a vote of 111 to 11, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I do have a question as far as the date. That's several years in the past, and I realize that was the expiration date. Is it necessary for that date to be in statute? In other words, could it be January 1, 2025? Would that affect anything? Just asking. It seems strange that we would say, oh, effective July 2020. And if you don't have an immediate answer, we'll give you an opportunity to do a little bit of looking research and potentially answer, because I do realize the program expired. It seemed like it slipped up on everyone somehow or another, and the department's been operating as though it had not expired, my understanding. But in any event, that was my question.
I don't know specifically. I assume with it being 2025, backdating it has no effect in the past. So, but I'll double check on that and see if I can get an actual answer.
All right. Questions of our reviser, Senator Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lawrence, I guess I had in my head that if you're over 65, you didn't have to purchase an annual hunting license. Is
75.
75? Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're a ways from that, Senator.
I've already got my lifetime hunting license, so we're okay.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I'm reading the supplemental note, and it said, this also removes the sunset for the Kansas Kids Lifetime Combination Hunting and Fishing License. When does the kids expire, or it doesn't expire? Is that correct?
It is currently set to expire on July 1 of 2032.
I was more talking about the age of the kid.
Oh, the kids are eligible to receive this if they're 7 and younger.
Right, but it doesn't ever expire is what I'm saying.
Correct, it is a lifetime license.
I'm getting my kids for grandson.
But if the expiration date is not removed, the program would expire, so children born after that date would not have the opportunity for parents, grandparents to purchase a lifetime hunting and fishing license. Additional questions of our reviser? Seeing none, thank you. Our first, well, and only conferee is Representative Ken Corbett. Representative Corbett, welcome to the Senate side of the Capitol.
Good morning, colleagues. How are we doing today? This bill does a couple of things. It removes the expiration dates off both the senior and the youth. And the reason I thought about doing it this way because last year, the senior lifetime combo license expired and nobody knew it. So last hunting season, none of your seniors could get the license. So by removing the expiration dates, if they ever get in a bind like that, or you're in the middle of a secretary swap or somebody's not watching the ball, your constituents would still be able to get the license. The money doesn't change. Whatever the money was, the money still is for both licenses. And they're very popular. I got some numbers. The youth license started in maybe October 22, and they're up to almost 7,000. And the seniors, about 55,000. And you're right about one thing. Used to be you didn't need a hunting license when you reached 65, but many moons ago. So it's a pretty simple bill, and it kind of we need to get all the young people and the senior people out as much as we can. Spend some money, buy some fishing tackle, shotgun shells. So I'd be glad to stand for questions.
Questions of Representative Corbett Committee. Senator Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Corbett, why, I know that you were very instrumental in the youth lifetime license, and it is a gift that many people in my district give their grandkids and so forth, and I really appreciate it. Why did we stop at 7 years old and not 10 years old?
There was somewhat of an agreement to go to 15, but somebody in Wildlife and Parks went to sleep and it came back, and this is all we got. So, but that's why it is. Some states, it is longer. But the nice thing about the youth license, usually if someone buys it for you, there'll be a mentor to you to take you hunting and fishing. And I think it's a real good license.
And one follow-up, Mr. Chair, is what is the lifetime license price after 7 years old? Is it the same for an adult?
Yeah.
And what is that price, do you know?
I think a combo lifetime's about between 900 and 1,000. So the youth license, if you get it before 5, is only 300. So it makes a good. And then they can come back and hunt all their life.
Thank you.
So you just said, Representative Corbett, the youth license, if they get it before age 5, did you mean age 7 or?
So ages 0 to 5 is 300, and then 6 and 7 is 500.
All right, thank you for that clarification. And then once you turn 8, all of a sudden you get to pay $900+.
Right.
Okay.
And unless this committee is focused, you can make it anything you want, but that's what it is.
Additional questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Corbett, I know you've been focused on this. So do you remember the discussion that was on the Senate floor that had to do, when we were talking about the age, that had to do with would there be enough funding for the Department of Wildlife and Parks, and wanting to make sure that those fees were there to cover the expenses?
Yeah, I kind of done the math. $500 would actually carry probably 8 through 15. If that $500, it's a $4 a year match. So just do your math, $4 for 10 years or something. You know what I'm saying? If you don't want to increase it like that. So they're getting their match now, and they'll still get their match. You know what I'm saying?
I understand that there is the match for the number of residents that hold that fee, but I do know and would be uncomfortable without, I mean, we will get testimony from the department, but it wasn't a part of this bill. That funding, I know, was one of the things that was discussed, especially in our Senate committee and on the Senate floor.
So Senator, this bill here leaves all the financial numbers the same. Nothing ever changes. So this should be good as long as you've got kids and seniors.
I think my concern was just the comment about that it might have been a department decision, just because I remember those discussions and believe it was, if not a Senate decision, at least a Senate and House compromise. Thank you.
Representative Corbett, if a youth does not have a lifetime license, what is the annual fee?
I think you can hunt till you're about 16 in Kansas with someone, probably 17. When you're age 17, it may be like $26, $27 for just maybe hunting, then a fishing a little more. So it's.
So the youth can hunt and fish with an adult without a license?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the annual fee? So then it's, the numbers you gave are the fees for 17 up to age?
Right, and probably the same for seniors. They'd be the same fees if they didn't have the lifetime option.
Right, okay. Thank you. Additional questions of?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question, Representative Corbett, is I'm wondering if you have some small reservations like I do. I love the spirit of this bill. This is wonderful, of course. About into the future, in order to maintain our parks and to keep the services at the level that we have now, which some have questioned whether it's really as high as it ought to be anyway, if we're going to need SGF money to maintain that, if we keep taking bites out of the fees, since this department is so dependent on fees.
There is no bite out of the fees on this. One thing you need to kind of remember is that resident hunting and fishing licenses have been on a pretty good decline for maybe a decade. This kind of fills one end of it, getting the youth to kind of fill in and keeping the senior people that like to get outside. As long as those people are spending money for tackle, you get Pittman's Robinson dollars, and that comes back to the department.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Cover, for your presentation. You was probably around when they put these expiration dates on there. Was there a reason for that at that time?
We set up the youth license. That was somewhat agreed. That was kind of the first time that license has ever been issued. So they ran it. We agreed to give it 10 years. And I think it's shown that it's very effective. And I just don't want to get your constituents in a bind again where maybe the department misses the window, then you've lost a hunting and fishing season because the license would no longer be available. This just lets things go steady, and I guess the department can always raise the fees. They have that opportunity.
Additional questions, committee? Seeing none, Representative Corbett, do appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, Chair.
House Bill 2028. Representative Corbett is the only proponent we have listed. We do have neutral written testimony in your packet from the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. We have no other neutral. We have no opponents to the legislation. It will be my intent to work this legislation tomorrow, committee. So if you have thoughts on the legislation, be prepared. We will close the hearing on House Bill 2028, and we still have time in the committee, so we will turn our attention to House Bill 2158. House Bill 2158, we held a hearing last week. Now that you've had a chance to find your file in your folder, I will ask our revisor just to briefly give us a reminder as to what the legislation entails. Revisor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2158 would permit beekeepers who meet certain requirements to sell packaged honey and honeycombs without holding a food establishment or food processing plant license.
questions of the revisor on House Bill 2158? Okay, we will work the bill at this time. And I shut down last week Senator Bowser. He was making some excellent points, but I didn't hear a question coming, so I shut him down. So, Senator Bowser, I'm going to let you have the floor, and you can reiterate your comments and say whatever additional comments you have, if you have amendments or anything. Representative Bowser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're very gracious. I had my full honey sermon prepared last week, and I'll spare the committee that entire sermon. I just want to say this, I support this bill. It's a good bill. I campaigned again on removing burdensome regulations, especially for those small businesses and small business owners. I used to run a honey farm. I'm familiar with this industry. I know the challenges these folks are facing. I have family members that produce honey. And again, I just support this bill. I think there is an amendment coming, but I will I'll pause for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, you go to church, the sermons are certainly brief, if that was your, okay. All right. Sorry, I was making notes, expected this to go on for a while, and I was actually getting a cup of coffee to stay awake. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, committee amendments for House Bill 2158. Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Revisor Lawrence, if you could pass out the amendment. So while this is being passed out, sort of the approach here was we had a pretty robust hearing with proponents and opponents that are involved in the industry. So there are clearly some folks that have made some investments here, and I'm glad to see that this industry is growing and thriving. And I think it's important that we sort of, there's some clear lines in production that are sort of being established as this industry grows. And I think it's important that we sort of respect that. So what I'm proposing in this amendment here is sort of a compromise position that will protect some of the sanitary concerns as well as kind of keep that existing balance. So to summarize what this bill would do, it would, first, this would only apply if you want to sell your product at retail, right? So you want to bottle it, you want to take it to the grocery store. This doesn't impact if you're just selling to individuals or at the farmer's market. This doesn't apply to you. But if you want to sell and you exceed at retail, it drops the cap in the sales down to 25,000, so it cuts that in half. It would require a registration at no cost with the Department of Agriculture. It makes it clear that there's no, I reworded commercial kitchen, but there's no commercial commission requirements because that's typically the expensive piece of the food safety license. But it would allow the department to put out some minimum sanitary standards that would be way less than that. The idea there is just so that you can send your product to retail and know that there were some minimum standards followed. And then it requires that if you're selling without this, without following these standards or registration, that you put if you don't have a full license, you just put a sticker on the bottle or on your label that says it's not subject to routine inspection. So I would move my amendment and then stand for questions if there's a second. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So it allows the department to issue minimum sanitary standards, I think is the language we put in here. And the idea is that that's for bottling, right? They would put out sort of a guide that the people that want to take advantage of this would say, would be able to say that they followed, so it's on page 2, line 5 is where the bubble is. By registering, you'd follow the department's minimum sanitary standards for packaging, and it's limited to packaging. So that way that you can, the predictability of retail is the idea there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I really like where you said the product not subject to routine inspection by the Kansas Department of Agriculture. It kind of reminded me of when we did the raw milk one last year. My question is, when you, on page 2, you, not to exceed 50,000, you went to 25,000. My question is, why did you come up with 25,000? And if they go over that, well, then will they have to have the regular equipment that was talked about before? And that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, working with proponents of the bill, 25,000 was an acceptable number. At $10 a pound, that's still 2,500 pounds of product. It's a large amount of production. If you're really producing more than that, you're a pretty large scale operation that probably ought to have the regular license. But to your question, if you exceeded that and you wanted to sell it, you'd have to have the regular food safety license. But in visiting with the department, it's not necessarily you're going to have a commercial kitchen for your products, right? Some of it would depend what you're doing. My understanding is they do work to try and avoid that big of a capital requirement for production.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Titus, I was wondering, because let's go back to the milk mill too, the size of the font in labeling, was that considered or addressed? And wondered if that needed to be.
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did not address it. I thought about it briefly for a moment and remembered raw milk and decided that the people producing this product and the consumers are savvy enough to read the label, and everyone, I think, understands what we're trying to accomplish here.
The only thing that I would say, you can make that font so small you can't read it. So somehow I'm thinking that would be nice if that was somehow addressed to some size. Second question I have, do we know how many commercial kitchens we have in Kansas for beekeepers?
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not.
Senator Fagg.
I thought I'd heard like 30 or something. If I'm wrong, I was shocked how many there was, whatever that number was. So we're kind of affecting those people that they've invested in this, and now you're letting a deal. So I'm just out for discussion on that kind of thing. So thank you.
Senator Bowser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just remind the committee that we heard testimony that honey has no expiration date. There's been honey found in Egyptian tombs from 3,000 years ago, and you can eat it today and not get sick. Never had any sort of foodborne illness from honey. I attended a training last week from the National Conference of State Legislators. We talked about collaborative negotiation, where you sort of have a win-win. Both sides have some win-win, and so I'm in favor of this amendment. Again, I worked in the honey industry for a few years, have a pretty good feel for it. I support the amendment.
Additional questions, Senator Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for Senator Titus. So right now, this would allow the agency to set minimum standards adopted by the department for packaging. Could you envision that potentially becomes a much more burdensome beast than what the legislative intent would be?
Senator Titus.
Well, we limited it to sanitary standards for packaging. So there was an attempt to be very clear what the purpose of this was. It was to get a safe product to the store. So I don't see a lot of wiggle room the way that's written to expand, but it would be speculation.
Okay. And how would you feel about potentially having this be set up more of a voluntary program where you could voluntarily register and seek a certificate from the agency perhaps that says you met some sort of minimum sanitary standard that wasn't to the level of a full food licensed establishment?
I think I'd like to see the will of the committee on the amendment as proposed first, mostly to Senator Fagg's point about that there are a number of producers that have made a pretty significant commitment in this area and have tried to differentiate their product, and I'd like to respect that. And I think this is a nice halfway point that doesn't really require much if you don't want to do that, but it also respects the decisions that have been made.
Yeah, and I think in fairness, there's a distinction between trying to put your product into retail versus the kind of peer-to-peer sales model. So I do recognize that difference. So thank you, Senator Titus.
Senator Ware.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree that this is a good compromise between the two. It keeps everybody going, and it doesn't stand in the way of the small operator. The question, of course, is never about the honey itself. It's about how it's handled in the container and the cleanliness of the container that it goes into, and that sort of thing. So I think this answers the questions nicely. I like this amendment. Thank you.
Senator Bowser, with your expertise, if you're willing to answer a question, I will allow. If you don't wish to, you don't have to because you're not the one offering the amendment. When it comes to honey, you have indicated that honey found 3,000 years old. I doubt it was in very sanitary conditions, but it was still edible, still not causing any problems. Is there much chance that packaging of honey can contaminate the honey?
No, I'd say there's very little chance of that. Honey is made up such that bacteria and things cannot survive in honey. It traps the oxygen or kills the bacteria. There's never, that I'm aware of, and I think we heard testimony to the point that there's never been a foodborne illness attributed to honey. It's probably one of God's two greatest creations, honey, and then maybe beer would be the second one.
The preceding commentary is that of Senator Bowser, and does not necessarily reflect the views of the Senate Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. God's greatest creation, I believe, is the females, but that's a whole other topic. Senator Alley, before we get too far out of bounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned, Mr. Chair, you weren't very fond of the register with the Department of Agriculture. I see here that there is no mention in the bill about fee for registration. Is there any fee for registering?
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No fee. We wanted it, it's purely just to have the list of folks that are doing this, that the standards apply to, so that if there were ever any sort of health issue, there would be a easy way to trace back where the product came from.
Could the Wildlife and Parks Department put a fee on, based on this, to charge to register?
It explicitly says shall register and at no cost to the honey producer.
And it is Senator Alley with Department of Agriculture, not Wildlife and Park. Correct, Senator Titus. Senator Alley, additional questions? So clarifying on that topic, if a beekeeper wishes to sell honey to a business who then will then retail, they could not if they had not registered. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make certain the committee was aware of that fact. Additional questions on the amendment? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment back to the font size. I would hope that they look at that very carefully. I hate to hold the bill up because of that, because that'd be a whole nother thing. But that'd be something that if got any complaints, I'll be watching that kind of thing. Try to make it where it's readable is what I'm saying. So just a comment. Thank you.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the comments both on the labeling and on the minimum standards. And this would allow, I'm assuming, the department to make those through rules and regs. So, because it says adopted by the department. So we also will see rules and regs as they come through the process. So I'm comfortable with that being the way. I'd rather put, if we want to deal with font size, I'd rather see that in rules and regs than in the bill.
Senator Starnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Titus, when you said you'd work with proponents, which proponents, Kansas Beekeeper Association or Department of?
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Primarily Senator Bowser. Not that he's endorsing the amendment and totally, just I bounced several ideas off him after visiting with the department since he had experience.
Additional questions or comments on the proposed amendment? Seeing none, Senator Titus, you may close on your amendment.
I close.
You have heard the motion to amend House Bill 2158. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion appears to pass. Motion does pass. We are back on the bill as amended. Further amendments? I'll entertain a motion if the committee is ready to make a motion. Senator Bowser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a motion that we pass out of committee favorably House Bill 2158 as amended.
Motion by Bowser, seconded by Francisco. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion appears to pass. Motion does pass. The bill is headed to the Senate floor as amended. That is all that we will take time for today, committee. Tomorrow, it is the intention of the chair to work another bill, if I can find my note, plus the one we heard today. Oh, the task force, 2172, I think, would be the bill that we will be working tomorrow. Could be a little bit lengthy, so I would ask you to be here to be ready. We will start with the bill we heard today, 2028, and then we will move to 2172, and we shall see if we have time for an informational briefing from the Department of Agriculture at the end of the committee. That will be our final committee meeting for the year, unless we should meet at the rail for something specific, which we may, and that would be primarily, from my perspective, just to approve minutes of the committee. And you have received minutes. Have you sent any out that have not been approved? Okay, so there, you have not received any that have not been approved. I have nothing further for the good of the committee. Is there anything additional from committee members? Seeing none, with that, we are adjourned.